Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar, part of Vocational Education Training Week 2022. The ARISE team are presenting this morning, and the title of our presentation is Using Digitalization to Overcome Vocational Exclusions for Training. The team today will be going through different parts of what we're doing in ARISE as part of our project and how we're overcoming the blockages that are stopping skills and people being engaged in upskilling, and how the vocationally excluded can be included by using digitalization. As I said, the ARISE team will spread all across Europe, from Ireland through to North Macedonia, and they'll be presenting at the different stages of the webinar. My name is Paul McCormick. I'm from Belfast Metropolitan College, and I'm doing the introduction about how we're going to revolutionise the learning process. I will then pass on to Dr. Barry Mccauley in Technology University Dublin, and Barry will outline the digitalization, how that is accelerating vocational engagement. We will then pass on to Italy to the president of IBIMI, Anna Morena, and Anna will outline task-based learning and the work that's been done in ARISE to make that centre stage. We'll then move on to Beyond Blended, how adaptive learning has been utilised, and Andrew Hamilton from Belfast Metropolitan College will take that section. That will be followed up by Jan Kromvik in ISSO in the Netherlands, and Jan will talk about micro pathways, how those modules have been built, and how we're putting accreditation and certification in to accelerate that journey. After that, Dr. James Harty, KEA in Copenhagen, will take over and talk about authentication and how we're using blockchain to make sure the back end is secure. We'll then pass on to North Macedonia to our good colleague Diana Likar, and Diana then will talk about measurable success, how we measure that in the skills and the upskilling the process we're moving forward. I will then come back on and describe in the summary what we think success looks like, how we think Europe could move forward, and that will be followed by a Q&A session at the end. We have a chat function there within the format. Please feel free to use that, and we'll pick up the questions at the end. We would love today to be a two-way conversation, not just us presenting to you. We'd love to get the feedback back in, so it helps inform our work, it helps shape our work, and it helps us work in partnership and cohesion all across Europe to answer the vocational education training needs that Europe needs. We are leading the project in Belfast Met as part of the ARISE team. We describe the partners all across Europe and how we are now harnessing the full potential of digitalization to address the current obstacles in the training market. There are many obstacles there stopping people engaging, stopping people becoming fully vocationally mobile. We want to use digitalization to change the face of training, to equip trainees and learners with the necessary quality skills, enabling them to make full benefit of their opportunity, and then bring those benefits to society so we overcome the skills shortages, we overcome the challenges in society, and we overcome what we need to move forward. As I said, we've done the agenda there, myself right through, then Barry Mccauley, Anna Morena, Andrew Hamilton, Jan Kromvik, James Hardy, Diana Likar, then back to myself. So folks, as I said, feel free to engage through the chat, share your ideas, share your concepts, and challenge the speakers, because through that challenge, we're able to build a stronger discussion, build a stronger solution as we move Europe forward. The introduction of what we think, how we are revolutionizing the process using digitalization, is we recognize there's a demand and supply mismatch. Demand is outstripping supply because of the blockages I talked about earlier, because of the obstacles that haven't been overcome. These blockages, these obstacles have resulted in skill shortages worldwide, in the construction sector, in engineering, in all of the different industries. We need to take that core of people and revolutionize the process to make full benefit and full opportunity of the skills and expertise that they have. Because of the skills not being deployed, we are not meeting the energy efficiencies in industry that we require. Many opportunities have been missed because we're not reaching out to what we call the vocationally excluded. People with the skills and expertise, but lack the recognition in order to get that mobility. Without that mobility, they're restricted because they don't have what I call the necessary skills visas, the passports, the accreditation, the certification to give them the mobility they require. Today's skills mechanism Today's millennials and Generation Z require training and upskilling to go beyond just taking notes, remembering information and learning by rote and repeating that in exams. Anna will talk later about the task-based learning, what they need to do that task, to do it to their utmost ability, get the energy savings from it and make sure it's done properly. That education is task-based. It enables them to think for themselves, solve problems in real time, and importantly, it brings the skills delivery model from the current static position it is in to become a dynamic model where there's engagement, there's two-way flow, where the learner feels empowered, the learner feels moved forward and is able to take benefit as they do that. Why are we doing this? Because we firmly believe, as does the European Union, as does Vocational Education Training Week, and the webinar hosts of us today, Build Up Skills. Skills matter. We must address the urgency of upskilling. We must reskill and enable industry. If we're to recover post-COVID, the President of the European Union has said it'll be based on twin pillars of the green economy and digitalization. President Ursula von der Leyen has said that. But what joins those twin pillars of green economy and digitalization is skills. Skills is the oil for that engine that's going to get that engine of recovery moving and get Europe post-COVID, the energy crisis we're in, moving forward. And in order to do so, we must transform the education interface. We must make it fit for today's purpose. We need to improve the core process of skills delivery and training. Andrew Hamilton will be talking later on about how we chunk that down into bite-sized learning, how we chunk that down, as Jan will talk about, into micro modules, micro accreditation, and give that journey an acceleration that is required. How we then use and leverage that and technology process, as James will talk about, to meet those goals, fulfill customer expectations, and meet the needs of industry to accelerate forward. Importantly, how we use digitalization, the processes, and all of the different parts of that to remove the friction from the skills interface that is currently blocking people from engaging, blocking people from moving forward, and getting that European-wide mobility. As I said earlier in my introduction, the ARISE partnership is drawn all across Europe, from North Macedonia right across to Ireland and all points in between. The European Union skills workforce is in between there as well. We need to get that more mobile and remove that friction. The ARISE project is developing that open competency-based qualification scheme. It's taking that friction out. It's making it more dynamic so that people can engage, bring the micro modules, and have that transactions that make it count. We are creating a system for issuing, verifying, and sharing micro credentials that enable the learner and industry to benefit, creating that digital platform that allows for ease of engagement, and it breaks down the traditional barriers for learning that are currently operating as obstacles. We are revolutionizing the learning process by monetizing the skills and learning exchange, bringing gamification into the process that Andrew Hamilton will talk about later on, to make sure we stimulate the learner. We engage the learner, stimulate, and keep them on board through lifelong learning, not a stop-start process. I'd now like to pass over to Barry Mccauley, Technology University Dublin, and Barry then will take us through how digitalization is accelerating that vocation engagement. Over to you, Barry. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. My name is Barry Mccauley, and I am working with Paul and the ARISE team in the development of materials that we will be using in regards to the ARISE platform. My colleague Ryan Dempsey from TU Dublin and myself are responsible for Work Package 5. And part of Work Package 5 is understanding the market, in understanding the skills that we're trying to create, the materials, the assessments, the methodologies, and what they actually look like, and aim them at the vocational sector and how we can ensure that we actually meet the requirements that they need. So one of the first things that was required to do in this work package, and in general for the whole project, was to understand the actual need and the want and the drive for digitalization within the sector. And a couple of key reports have been released lately, which have really helped to drive home how important digitization is in regards to the current and future sectors. A recent report, as we can see here, by the Mackenzie Global Institute highlights that the advanced digital technologies in the EU and the UK will present enormous growth opportunities. A report recently by the European Sector Observatory report highlights that 85% of all EU jobs need at least some basic digital skills. The findings show a shortage of digital and technology skills to successfully and rapidly implement these initiatives, with an absolutely astonishing total of 8.6 million people across the EU public sector needing to have digitization skills for 2023. And this is where ARISE will come in, because we will aim, along with other EU funded projects, to try and target this gap and provide the tools and the methodologies and the platform and the assessment and the access to expertise to try and make an impact into these staggering numbers. So to meet these impending targets, new methods of skilling, educating, and certification needs to be exploited to cater to the diverse sector. So going back to the construction sector report, this report acknowledges that automation is increasingly widespread utilization of BIM are now two of the key things in regards to driving the sector forward inside these digital skills. Once again, where we are with the ARISE is that we are looking at providing this alternative to the current way of training. What we usually see is with traditional kind of methods is that it reaches only a certain demographic, and in some aspects, some people don't have the time or the access or even the financial means to upskill and to try and kind of figure into these very outstanding numbers and trying to kind of reduce them. So what we're aiming within the ARISE is to provide a platform along with materials, along with the micro credentials Jan will discuss, in order to target these and provide a new way of learning for the vocational market. Along our way, in order to, once again, to ensure that what we do will address the barriers to entry, we've looked at some of the key barriers that a lot of people are facing, not only just in regards to upskilling, but also in the digitization aspect as well, because the digitized aspect in regards to people upskilling still hasn't grown to the level that we'd like to see it to, despite all the wonderful functionalities and benefits that digital construction can bring. We still have not yet completely embraced that. So part of the ARISE team was to break that down and understand why that was, not just barriers from the perspective of the industry, but also educational barriers. Some of the things we came across were change resistance and high costs, not enough real life examples or awareness of actually what digital construction technologies and processes can bring, not having the correct communication supports, workers not actually understanding the benefits of embracing digitization, as well as general barriers to entry to training and client demand, and also the legal aspect of it. And the educational barriers, we've also found that there's not a lot of expert in this field. Teachers have particular habits in regards to, they have their own portfolio to teach, and they're not really open in some aspects to embracing these technologies, and also the resource and time aspects. So what we're trying to do here as a team is trying to be aware of what the market needs and how we can get there by looking at what these barriers are and how we can address these. So what we found, myself, my colleague Ryan, along with the ARISE team, is that we've started to look at, okay, what does digitization bring to the table? What's to do different to vocational training that's happening at this moment in time? And what we found is that a lot of people are really want to embrace the space because it's just a new way of learning. It's a new way of advancing their abilities For example, some of the delivery tools, instead of traditional classrooms, we're looking at web-based tutorials, we're looking at narrative videos, gamification. And that's something that we're planning to use within the ARISE platform as well, is all of these types of delivery tools underpinned through gamification methodologies. And speaking about methodologies, some of the key methodologies that digital construction embraces that we found the sector really wants further of includes problem-based learning, design for assembly, which is ultimately the breaking down of a model per se and looking at it through its whole life cycle, and understanding a multidisciplinary approach and appreciating the different actors within the construction process. And materials which people are engaging with more in the digital construction space include case studies, BIM execution plans, problem solving and related to the industry, as well as developing software skills. And that's a key aspect of what people need and are driving towards, and will open doors across multiple jurisdictions within the EU. So just to summarise, ARISE will stimulate and inspire the demand for sustainable energy skills from industry and individuals by redesigning skills of change. And we'll do that by providing transparent upskilling transactions and recognising upskilling performed. This will be achieved by delivering a portable skills mechanism that provides a learner with access to vocation, mobility, flexibility. The aspects there we're going to do this under blockchain, and I haven't gone into that in too much detail, which is really the underpinning of the platform, because I know my colleague James will detail this throughout his presentation. So hopefully that's given you an aspect of why we believe in regards to the ARISE solution that underpins through digitization, the importance that it will have in order to really target the EU market. I'll now pass over to my colleague, Anna Morano, who is the president of the Italian BIM Institute of, the president of the Institute of BIM in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. As I am Anna Moreno, the president of IBIMI, which is also the Italian chapter of the Building Smart International. I am trying to move the slides, but they do not move. Okay, so it's important to say that we have a double role in Italy, which is both as a professional association and also promoting the building smart development. I still don't know why it's not moving, so please move for myself. Okay, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Okay, what I want to start with is that we need to be aware of the fact that about 20 million of enterprises in Europe are micro enterprises. So it means between 0 and 9 employees. So we cannot expect that all these enterprises would have all the knowledge related to all the technologies of renewable energies and also energy efficiency. So as it was stated in the previous presentation, we need also to think to a different way to work. Next. Okay, here we see just some of the main technologies that are related to the zero energy building. So it's the use of biomass, so wind energy, geothermal energy, solar energy, but also heat pumps and building envelope, building automation system, and air tightness. And for all these technologies, we need competences to design, realize, install, manage, maintain, dispose, and as we are going into digitalization, we need also people expert of the digital asset management. So we cannot expect that people would have all this knowledge. Next slide. Here we see an example of how it could be promoted, the new way of working, collaboration using BIM and common data environment. Here, for instance, we see the 3D model, number one, which is one that is made usually by small designer enterprises. They could ask help for people, for expert of point of clouds, so that they would have a very realistic 3D model. And if they populate this model with the BIM elements of anything in the building, using open standard, so that's important, building smart activities. They can use IFC files to be used by different other experts, like model conditioning plant, photovoltaic model, and even green wall model, or the envelope, the building envelope. And so different experts could make their design using the same georeferentiated coordinates, so that finally the designer can collect all this information and prepare the federated model, as it will be number 6, so that the owner can take informed decision based on a very realistic view of what it could be. And the same could be also used by the energy expert to evaluate the return of investment. Next slide. Okay, now, so this is to explain why we believe that task-based learning is important for small and medium enterprises, because as we have seen, they are very, very small, and usually they consider any qualification or certification as an extra cost for themselves. But also they are afraid that by employing very qualified workforce, they could lose very easily because they could find more remunerated jobs. But if we promote this new way of working with collaboration, they could collaborate with other SMEs, but they would need to trust these SMEs. And so the recognition of a system, a trustful system for the recognition of competencies would be the way how they can make networking and really use all the technologies in the best way. Next. We see here, this has already been promoted by Building Smart International. They already are promoting the qualification, task-based qualification. They start with the learning outcome, and they are promoting this in all the world. And we are promoting a new qualification that is just related to BIM and energy performance. And the aim is to understand which information need to manage and exchange during the lifetime of a building. So it's not only, it is really the lifetime. So it's in the preliminary analysis of the building, and in the preliminary design, technical design, construction, and finally the building management, which is the phase where the BIM has the most advantages, about 30% of cost reduction due to the possibility to find the right information in the right moment, in the right format for the right people. I'm finished. Last one. This is, I invite you to read this, the document that we have uploaded in our website that is related to energy performance in building. And we invite you also to answer to an inquiry and that we have also promoted through our forum. The code is the address for the Building Smart Forum. Here are my contacts, and I will be really pleased if you want to send me any comments to this guideline or to other documents that we are uploading in our website. Thank you. I pass to Andrew Hamilton. Thank you again.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Anna. Hi, my name is Andrew Hamilton from Belfast Met, and I'm going to be looking at the issue of beyond blended and how we adopt our learning. Just checking if I can advance. Oh. Sorry. These are actually the old slides. Unfortunately, the update isn't there. So I'll just talk over what we were looking at here, or is it possible to share the other presentation?
Andrew, go ahead, please.
Okay, so basically what we're looking at as part of the ARISE, and we've been looking at with several of our different projects, is what does or should blended look like? I suppose this last couple of years, digital transformation has taken quite an accelerated approach. I recall one of our partners on the BIMcert project 2 years ago, just as we started to enter and look at online learning, as the COVID pandemic changed how we were delivering our teaching within our colleges and universities, that he commented after studying and researching blended learning for 10 years, it took a global pandemic to move things forward. But over the last 2 years, we've seen significant digital transformation in terms of both the learning of our colleges, universities and campuses effectively going online. For those of us within the ARISE project, the challenge here is for us to create a new and digital education skills model that aligns with the demands and the needs of our audience, but also with society. The very fact that we're delivering this session today via a conference call is demonstration of that. Fortunately, some of the issues that employers are facing, Barry has already highlighted there earlier about the need for digitalization within the sector, and at 85% of all jobs will need basic IT skills. This is from simple things like joining conference calls, sharing meetings, and the way we're doing today. But there's a number of barriers there, and through part of our research in this project and also in other projects that have built to the ARISE project that you see today, has resulted or provided us with results that show that the large majority of the barriers are time, availability of the staff to actually partake in training, and then ensuring that we have continued engagement on the training itself. For a lot of the people that we're seeking to upskill, basically we're looking at creating suitable pathways for them. For some, unfortunately, the road is closed, and that may be due to any of those barriers that we've mentioned on the previous slide there. So what we're trying to create is to leverage more digital transformation to allow for a wider reach for those vocationally excluded from the digital skills that are required for as we move forward and implement further BIM and energy savings via the use of BIM. So it's about creating more access points allowing more opportunities that actually come to the learner rather than necessarily the learner coming to the institute or the learning centre. We're looking at providing additional opportunities, shorter, more accessible pathways, and perhaps above all for the learner in today's society is that flexibility. How do they balance the work, life, family, outside of the job commitment with wanting to continue their studies and to upskill and learn more? So that's where that digital transformation, sorry, I just mentioned that on the previous slide, that's where a lot of what we've been looking at, and you'll see in slides from my colleagues who follow me, is this idea of bite-sized learning, taking what would be a formal qualification and breaking it down into smaller chunks that can be covered in a short period of time. But a bit like the Pac-Man show here we have, you sort of eat the little beads there represent portions of learning, and whenever you have achieved enough of those portions, you can actually cash those in for a qualification. And James and I will talk about how we do that digitally, but looking at this idea of digital badges so we can make sure that there's a pathway that provides the training that each person needs for their particular job, their particular role, and how they wish to progress their own educational and career pathway. Using unique models, we'll be seeking to try to create that adaptive. So it's a bit like not so much a pick and mix, but that there are certain pathways or directions that people can take. By selecting various modules, those will lead to certain competencies or construction roles or roles within the sector. We'll look at gamification to create stimulation and hopefully engage our learners. Just because we gamify doesn't necessarily guarantee that we will engage the learner. So that's part of the challenge, making sure that how we do this actually meets the learner's needs and engages them. And a lot of the time that will be bespoke learning resources and activities that could be delivered just in time on-site training, as we have done with some of our projects that are part of the ARISE team, to make sure that it is as inclusive as possible. And finally, if using the digital footprint that we have and the digital reach and mobile technology, I think we've all probably experienced over the last 2 years, certainly within our own college. I know that overnight we went from being a bricks and mortar institute to being virtually an online delivery within a matter of weeks whenever the COVID pandemic struck. I think there's a lot to be learned from that. Unfortunately, one of the slides that I wanted to show earlier, I was looking at this aspect of in-person learning rather than being face-to-face, because we can do face-to-face online, and certainly that was one of the issues that we discovered as a college when we went online. There's a whole issue around policies about even sharing cameras and so forth whenever you're on a class. But for a lot of the feedback that we've had is that people still like to have that face-to-face element. So whilst they may not have it in person, certainly online and the use of video conferencing does allow for that face-to-face aspect of it. So therefore it's making sure that we have digital at the foremost of our strategy. And a lot of the platform that we're looking at, the key thing here is to make sure that it is mobile. It's suitable for mobile phones and devices, and it's not necessarily tied to a PC or a tablet. So we're trying to use that IT in as broad a way as possible. So apologies, that was a little bit disjointed in terms of my slides. The main thing we want to consider within this is looking, what should blended look like? What have we learned from the last 2 years? What are the learners and the users telling us from the platforms that we work with? And how do we ensure that that blended learning provides that face-to-face element as well as the interaction and the engagement? I'm going to hand over now to Jan.
Thank you, Andrew, for this very clear clarification and introduction to the project. Now I'm continuing this webinar on micro pathways, modules, accreditation and certification. Why do you need task-based learning outcomes? Within ARISE, we are going to work with task-based learning outcomes. You need them for fast upskilling, for example, for upskilling on-site in a mobile training location. You also need them, for example, for green, easy public procurements, because if the learning outcomes are task-based, they are transparent, they are comparable, and you can use them in procurement in order to make sure that every offer is comparable with another offer. We are also using them to enable microlearning. For example, if you have the strategy digital first, mobile learning first, then you can learn literally at any place, at any time, even in the store where you are buying components for a certain installation. Now see, there is a little bit latency, but to continue, why do we also use task-based learning outcomes? If you want to issue badges, they have to be very clear. And we are using within the ARISE platform experience from earlier projects to issue personalized learning badges that can be linked with digital skills cards. And James will shortly tell us how that can be done with the blockchain, as the current solution is not yet working with the blockchain. How do task-based learning outcomes work? What are they? A unit of learning outcome is a statement regarding what the learner knows, understands, and is able to do. And it's very important, this includes a responsibility, and the learner is able to do it on completion of a learning process. And the unit of learning outcomes themselves are existing of knowledge elements, skill elements, and the responsibility, most times described as a competence. They deliver a practical perspective on the required skills in the value chain and required overlaps between actors. They make it possible to deliver increased recognition of learned skills. They deliver clear learning outcomes for the development of training materials. So if you use the task-based learning outcomes from the ARISE project, for example, you can give them to a training provider, and then the training provider exactly knows what needs to be in the training in order to deliver a good, high-quality training. And it's flexible. We are working on digitization and the use of the building information model, and the world is rapidly changing. And that means that there will be other materials, there will be other, for example, refrigerants, there will be other tools for using the building information models, there will be new standards upcoming. When you are using task-based learning outcomes, you have a baseline of the learning outcomes that are needed, and you can very flexible adapt to the new situation that is occurring due to innovations. How do they work in practice? I am showing you some examples from the Unit of Learning Outcomes database from the Build Up Skills Advisor app. Every unit of learning outcome is linked to a subtask. Here you see, for example, a task for the heat pump installer. He needs to be able to advise about the heat pump installation. That's a task. And as a part of that task, there are 3 subtasks. He needs to be able to advise on technical aspects, to identify points for attention and risks, and to advise solutions. And this overview of tasks and subtasks is covering all phases in the construction value chain in order to make it possible to make, for example, a value chain where the architect has a certain set of skills, then the engineer has a complementary set of skills, so that every actor in the value chain has the proper skill set to deliver on certain tasks. The learning goals that are linked to the subtask are always described in the form of a competence. So for the subtask advice on the technical aspects of the climate control system, there are 2 competences: unit of learning outcomes, check on the hydraulic circuit, and identify the main components of the heat pump. And these are further detailed out in the form of a competence, the responsibility, what skills are needed in order to be competent, and what knowledge elements are needed in order to apply your skills to be competent. Why do we also use task-based unit of learning outcomes? Because you can harmonize them. As you can see, this subtask is used in 2 tasks. That means that every task is only occurring once in the database, and every subtask is also occurring once in the database. So that if you are harnessing a micro module on a certain task, you can be able to do that task in several other qualifications that use the same task. And that's the same for the unit of learning outcomes. This unit of learning outcomes is used in 3 subtasks. And that means if you have done the micro learning that is linked to this unit of learning outcomes, you can apply it in 3 different situations. How will they be used in ARISE? Within ARISE, we are working on skills assessments powered by unit of learning outcomes that are task-based. You can do a skills self-assessment, and based on that skills self-assessment, you can receive an overview of your skill gaps. And at the company level, the skills assessments done within a certain company can be aggregated so that you can find out where you are as a company with regards to the maturity of the implementation of BIM. And if you have the ambition to achieve level 4, then the system will generate an upskilling pathway that is linking to the modules described by Andrew. And you can also see, for example, within a company, how the different profession groups needed to be successful are skilled and on what level they are acting. And that's very important because we find out that if you have a value chain and 1 or 2 actors are on a lower skill level than needed, we see the tendency that the group is following the lowest skill level available in the value chain. And if you properly upskill them beforehand to a certain level, you are far more successful within the value chain. This is it from my side. I am handing over to James Harty from KEA on the authentication blockchain.
Thank you, Jan, and welcome from sunny Copenhagen. Now you've seen how we've set out a platform and you have the ability to have learning, to get modules. What we need next is for those to be authenticated, and for that we're going to use the blockchain. So authentication is necessary because we're all aware of the aphorism that says fake it till you make it. And how many times have we done a job interview where you've had to go out and find all your certifications, find your last 20 employers and write them or present them so that you can prove you are who you are. This is a way of getting around this, because if you need authentication, it means there are untruths out there and we need to be able to verify and validate what it is you have and where it is you are. Blockchain allows us to do this. Blockchain, most of you might know it as something to do with Bitcoin. Here, it's not computers generating a lot of power to mine a coin. What we're doing here is blockchain is using the gray matter between your ears to get you accreditations and to build up your knowledge. Blockchain is a cryptography that is a trusted framework of data. Essentially, it is a ledger. A ledger is something that a priest used to have in order to record births, marriages, and deaths. And so if you go back 100 years, you can see who was born, who died, whatever. And it was accepted that the priest was a person of honor and didn't do anything incorrect. The blockchain removes this person and it becomes decentralized, immutable, and readily available. It can be used for establishing and verifying identities. So our users can be shown to be who they are. We can record transactions, which means that if you take 20 modules, we can say you've taken 20 modules. We can track the assets, so we can see who has done what. And at an advanced level, if we see that you've taken 17 modules and are too short of becoming competent in building smart or something, we can say to you, you need these two to get to here. So we're encouraging you to be part of what we are. And we can share this information and more. What's important is that it's a single version truth, and it also improves our trust levels, which is not very strong across construction. And as we're using it here, it can validate who you are and what you've done. If we look at a university in North Carolina in the US, East Coast Polytech, they have used a blockchain to verify that you have received the degrees and whatever from their university. So this means a graduate no longer needs to contact the registrar's office to have a verifiable degree sent to a prospective employer or for any other purpose. What they are using is something called block certs. And block certs is a standard for an application that issue and verify blockchain-based official records. They may include certificates for civic records, academic credentials, and so on. It's decentralized, it's standardized, it's recipient-centric, and it enables trustless verification through blockchain. Now, right now, blockchain is an open cert, and you can come along to the web page and you can just drop in something and see if it's verified, and so the whole thing happens independently. It's an open standard, so it's a mobile app, and we can just go and use the parts we want and integrate it into our system here. The way it works is that the issuer, which would be us, ARISE, we issue the recipient a blockchain credential. The user then accepts it, and once it's accepted and they've completed some modules, we'll hash that into the blockchain and it gets put onto the blockchain. This blockchain then sends a credential to the recipient, and now the recipient is able to send this to the verifier or to the employer, and the employer can then check to see that you are who you are and you have done what you've said you've done. Quite a simple process, but it needs to be robust. This Open Badges Validator core is made in Python. It's I won't go too much into what it does, but it improves your curriculum vitae and portfolios, and now it can be verified across borders and have competencies validated in other jurisdictions. So this means that if you're coming from Spain and have taken 30 modules and you want to work in Luxembourg or in Germany, we can now verify that you are the competent person you say you are. This is important on a European-wide level. In order to do this, we have also implemented that as a trainee, you take some modules, and then we're going to award you with a cert coin. This is in a reward system which isn't found elsewhere. So what you have previously, airlines have mileage cards and what have you, and so if you use the program a lot, they'll give you extra miles, etc. What we're doing here is, if you use us, we're going to issue you with cert coins, and if you gather cert coins up, if you go to a job interview and you have 50 and the other candidates have 2, it improves your chances of getting the job. Thank you. I would like to hand over to Diana.
Good afternoon from my side. This session is dedicated to measurable success. My name is Diana Lica from IC North Macedonia. In this session, we discussed about the impact of skills on buildings performance. Application of digital skills provides measurable effects on energy performance of buildings. As confirmed by the ARISE team previous research and demonstration through case studies, at least 10% of the impacts are due to the digital skills improvements and implementation for optimization of energy performance of buildings. This percent goes up to 20 when renovation of buildings comes in place. Optimization is based on a multi-scenario analysis of efficient energy consumption and costs of both building construction and operation. While in further stages, a reduction of performance gap is also possible. It was identified through our research and demonstration of a minimum of 20% assigned to improvement of skills of professionals who are engaged in construction and quality control. Improvement of operation schedule, furthermore, in the next stage of building usage and operation, gives possibility to reduction of energy consumption for at least 25% compared to the design stage. Therefore, we say that skills means gigawatt hours and euros. In the design stage, we carry out optimization of the design of the building by comparing feasible alternatives of the building design, varying indoor and outdoor parameters by scenarios that include building envelope, construction materials, selection, their composition, thickness of construction elements, building orientation in space, climate scenarios, occupancy schedule, and interior arrangement and functionality. We set the optimization function as a minimum of costs of both final energy consumption and investment and operation costs of the building, while preserving health, safety, and comfort of the occupants. In the operation stage, we have identified reduction of energy consumption compared to the designed energy supply. Usually in the design stage, we go to the safety side in order to provide safe, reliable, long-term energy supply of the building. That is the yellow line of the design energy consumption within 24 hours of energy simulation of selected typical day in a typical annual season. In real life, consumption of the energy of the building is presented by the blue line, which is due to the smart energy management system provided by sensors embedded in the building energy model, which relies on the BIM architectural model of the building, the digital twin of the building. During weekend days, energy consumption falls even more. That is presented with the dashed line. That means further reduction of energy consumption is operated in a smart way. Skills have a measurable value for all, for the learner, the employer, and the asset. Improvement of skills can be converted into measurable units of gigawatt hours of clean energy generation, millions of kilowatt hours of reduced final energy consumption, and millions of euros of saving transferred into investments in clean energy. Therefore, investing in skills means investing in future of professionals, organizations, sectors, and planet, environment. Digital environment, which we use in ARISE for information exchange, provides not only a higher efficiency of construction processes and lower cost of project development, but also promotes sustainability as smart indicators of buildings. Skills are not only an investment, because improved capacity and competence of upskilled professionals brings benefits in form of improved performance, value, and employability of the worker, improved performance of creative products and services, improved performance of buildings. Return on investment in skills is measurable in gigawatt hours, in tons of greenhouse gases emission reductions, euros of savings and investment. Therefore, return on investment becomes effective immediately, and skills are an investment that returns to all, providing a lifelong revenue. ARISE mission in this field is that skills and impacts thereof become more recognized by digital delivery. Opportunities of today for availability and accessibility of knowledge and education, enabled by digital learning delivery and transferability of learning records, should be used by younger and senior learners and supported by both academia and industry, taking in consideration benefits it brings to the professionals, employers, industry, and assets. ARISE concept of improvement and recognition of skills enhances the impacts on construction ecosystems and their environment. Thank you from my side, and I would like to ask the program manager, Mr. Paul McCormack, to give the summary of our session.
Thank you very much, Diana, and to all the other panelists for bringing us through the journey of what we see the territory and the landscape of vocational education and training, how it's changing in order to meet demand, meet need, but importantly, assist the European Union recover post-COVID. As we now come to the summary, and as just before I start, folks, keep your questions coming in. We'll have a question and answer session just after this. And then if you put your questions in, it keeps that engagement, as I mentioned earlier at the start. What does success look like post-COVID? What does success look like in Europe after? If I get the slides to move, it'll be okay. Can you move to the next slide, please, Daniel? They seem to have frozen on me. Thank you very much indeed. So what does success look like in 2022 and beyond? What defines success in the modern 21st century learning environment? What metrics are we going to use that are valued by industry and the learner? James, Jan, Anna, Diana, Andrew, and Barry brought you through all the different steps that are what I call the circular skills economy. We all talk about the circular economy for the climate change, for meeting need, but we also need to close that circle for the skills and the skills delivery. We have vocational education trainees. We have them excluded geographically and excluded because of the accreditation. But how do we close that loop? And we've walked you through that with the different parameters there, the different speakers. How we bring those people center stage. James touched on it there perfectly when he talked about mobility. How do we give that vocational mobility, not just to transfer geographically, but within their own sectors, within their own countries? And how do we get that vocationally mobile workforce? Make sure they're agile, well equipped with the necessary skills and the recognition to utilize and realize their full potential. Next slide, please. Then how do we measure success in the modern 21st century for the millennials and for Generation Z? It's no longer just financial terms. It's no longer just measured in euros, pounds, dinar, or whatever. It's given the learner the skills and the opportunity. So using the digitalization process, we've outlined how we've measured that, how we changed that. As Diana talked about, it's not just the skills to do the job, but also measuring the impact of the skills on the energy saving and coming up with that algorithm that will give benefits so people see the end result. That allows us to harness the full potential of digitalization, to recognize what we're doing there, deliver the future skill sets required by industry, and address what the current labour market needs, overcome the blockages, overcome the obstacles, so that vocational training is not stop-start. We remove what I called earlier that friction. We make the process more dynamic. As Anna talked about, it's task-based learning, small bite sizes that can be accredited, that Jan talked about, giving them the need to move forward. And that gives us a new labour market, a new opportunity. Next slide, please. So success for 2022 and beyond. Traditionally, success, training skills were a linear pathway. Everybody followed it like sheep down the same route. Andrew talked about the Pac-Man. People were able to change their own pathways, depended on their need, their opportunity, and their desire. It doesn't have to be prescriptive. It allows people to have choice, to develop what we in ARISE call the work-life training balance. How it fits in. It's not an add-on. There's no additionality. It sits there as part of that. The learning process is flexible. It's agile. It makes intelligent use of digital technology. It's not digital first. It's digital foremost. And it's part of that blended learning that Andrew talked about with the delivering there in Belfast Met and within the BIMcert project within Technology University Dublin. It's that blended use to allow people the choice that stimulates them. It engages and it gets the best out of that learner, out of those people. They're sitting there. As in any industry, you're taught you must utilize your assets, maximize your assets. The biggest asset we have is the workforce, and we're not utilizing that. We're not maximizing that because we haven't given them the digital toolbox with the digital skills that allows them to make the most out of their opportunity. It allows them to excel with the skills, the opportunity that they have. We need that to move forward. This is the start of the process with a lot of other projects all across Europe looking at this. The EU unit are looking at this digitization and skills. They're looking at how we change the system to remove the friction, make it more dynamic, and to grow that beyond. Next slide, please. So ARISE is meeting need. As I said, as part of other projects all across Europe. It's how we're leveraging digital transformation to get the system value from it. It's not digital at all costs. It's taking that value and putting an individual imprint on it so that everybody has choice. We're no longer clones. We need to get the innovation, the entrepreneur to come forward. So it stimulates, it enhances, and it accelerates the process. We're helping transform the education interface, bringing it from the traditional into the more dynamic and having the two working together. So we improve the core process of skills delivery. We look at task-based learning to give people the opportunity they desire. We're looking at on-demand training. It doesn't have to be 3 or 4 years long. It can be small 15, 20, 30 minutes units that you can build into through gamification, build into your learning, succeed in getting your cert coin as the cryptocurrency of the skills, and then exchange that cert coin for CPD points or for accreditation, and allow the learner to take the journey they want. Allow the learner the passports or the visas to be able to move through their workforce, move through the work that they have acquired, and leverage their skills across not just SMEs, but all of industry. Next slide, please. So success to us is not measured in financial terms. Success is having a mobile workforce equipped to meet the needs of industry today so that Europe can meet the fourth industrial revolution because you will have the skilled workforce. As I mentioned earlier, President von der Leyen talked about recovery post-COVID. 2 pillars, the green economy and digitalization. Between that, the dynamic is the skills. Where we build the skills, where we give people the skills, the opportunity, and the mechanisms to be of their best, to help them improve and to reach out and to aspire to deliver what they want. That's what success looks like. The team within ARISE and all the other projects are delivering that. If you look at the success even just of this webinar, there are people in build-up. We have Daniel and Maria in the background making sure it all works. Larissa and the team in ACE were putting all the nuts and bolts together. And then you saw the presenters here. Those are the partners that are part of ARISE in conjunction with Antonio in IST in Portugal, with Jaap in Building Changes in the Netherlands, making sure that in cohesion, we deliver the opportunity. And that's the opportunity for skills in 2022 and beyond. It's about cohesion, meeting the need of the many, not just the need of the few, and using digitalization so that we're able then to access that, to give the learner choice, to give the learner opportunity, but importantly, to give the learner a pathway. As they go through their learning curve, are going to go through the learning journey, and on that is skills escalator. They're not going to be stopped at the borders because they don't have the skills passport or the skills visas. There are no barriers. So it's about removing the barriers, removing the friction, and bringing that dynamism in. So we're moving now into the question and answer session. If I can ask all of the panelists, put their cameras on, put their microphones on, and I have a list of questions here on the screen, and I'm going to present them or position them to the different presenters. And the very first question, and is to you, Anna. Do you believe that task-based learning is more suitable for SMEs?
Yes, definitely, I think so, because I know the small and medium enterprises, and they are always very busy. They cannot go to very long learning courses. So I think that's the only way that we can tackle this target. And as I shown in my slides, there are 20 millions in Europe, so it's not a negligible task.
I'll take the same question and give it to Jan. Is there a difference in task-based learning, Jan, for SMEs than multinationals, or is it the same coin, only different faces of the same coin?
It's not only the same coin, it's also the same side. If you learn task-based, you can learn at any place, if it is an SME or self-employed or a very big enterprise, it means the same. You are learning a certain task, and with the blockchain, we are able to verify that you are able to perform that task at a certain level.
So if we drill down into that, Jan, what you're saying is skills mobility is no different in SMEs than it is in multinational. They need everything.
Indeed.
Single answer. Thank you very much for that. Next question is to Barry in Dublin. Barry, we have a question coming in. It says, do you believe that any worker and professional of the building industry should have digital competencies? You're on mute, Barry.
That's a good question, Paul, and it's a difficult one to answer because I think it'll come down to each individual perspective. But the figures that I showed today, where there's an 85% need to upskill, I believe that if we want to advance in our digitization pathway, that yes, then every worker will have to have some skill. That skill is, quite different to what someone might need for a BIM modeler compared to someone that might just need it for bricklaying. You just need to understand how to integrate with the iPad and maybe explore the model and to see the properties and so forth. So it's quite different, the levels expected, but I do firmly believe that if we are to progress and work towards an overall digitization sector, we will need all workers to have a very basic level of digitization knowledge. And I think most of us have that without even knowing it. If you look at people, for example, taking something quite simple as my 1-year-old daughter, I give her my iPhone and she play with it, and she knows to kind of press to skip ads on YouTube when she's looking at her cartoons because she knows that I'm doing it. So it's kind of a reflective muscle. And this is a digitalization kind of skill that she's learning just from birth. And a lot of people on site will have that through phones, and it's just using the phones maybe to explore the model or explore kind of documentation and trying to kind of get everyone to think that, yeah, this is the new norm.
If I take the same question and go to Belfast to Andrew, and given the background, Andrew, where you have been delivering some of these bite-sized modules through Beyond Blended to deliver the digital competencies, how impactful has that been within industry?
Thanks for the easy question, Paul, because that's a difficult one for us to measure as educators, because all we can do is provide the training and see where it goes from there. I think the example that springs to my mind is the last course we ran, fully blended, with one of our new prototypes from the BIMcert Level 2 qualification. We opened that up just sector-wide, and one of the people who attended actually worked in the concert industry, the lighting section, did lighting for the likes of the major bands that tour across Europe. And even just picking up on what Barry was saying about the need for digitalization, he was even putting together where they may be in Belfast for a show for 2 nights this week and move to Copenhagen next week. And if they had a virtual digital model of the venue that they're working in, they can set and test and trial those rigs before they even get into the building. So I think sometimes, personally, I find that when we teach and when we deliver, we don't know necessarily what the end impact will be. But certainly the breadth of where it's now starting to permeate has surprised me recently in the last couple of months. If that answers your question, then I think there's more people turning towards it because they see the benefit of having that virtual input into the real world. And I think, like Barry was saying, personally, I think it'll come to all levels, because if you just even look at, banking now, for example, most of our banking is online, either through an internet interface or through an app on our phones. and we're just seeing so many changes across society in terms of how we share information. But as James was alluding to there, I think the most important aspect of it is the integrity of that information and that ability to tick it off on the ledger. And I think as people start to realize that that can be tracked and traced, then we will all gain much more confidence in these digital ways of doing things. If I think, like, I don't carry a wallet anymore, because my bank details are on my iWatch and my watch, my phone. And at the start, it was a bit of a trust issue, as James says. But when you realise that the trust is there and the system is there for the protection, then we'll move to it.
Andrew, I'm reliably informed that the Queen of England never carried a wallet either, but that wasn't because of digitalisation. Does that mean that you're related to royalty through digitalisation?
I'll decline to answer that just for security purposes, Paul.
James, as Andrew talked about there, it's that digital competencies, and I know the organisation KEA that you're part of are leading the pathway here. How has that evolved within Copenhagen and on the wider Danish model to reflect as a student and a learner how they have succeeded?
Thank you, Paul. Good question. I think one of the most obvious that I can point to right now is that we are beginning to implement common data environments, CDEs. And this is meaning that we're beginning to see less and less paperwork documents. And what we're beginning to see is everything is a digital document or a digital drawing. And using various programs, everything's up in the cloud. And we've just ran exams last week, and it was a presentation, an oral presentation, but the medium through which all the data was processed was through a cloud app where we could access the most recent information, we could share it, we could look at it. And this is, I think, is going to move construction industry on a lot. It sounds simple, but it means that you only have verifiable one piece of information and you know it's up to date and you know where it is. So I think that's what we're seeing as driving us forward, and we're getting quite good results out of this. And we're also finding out that I think it was Barry mentioned that getting teaching staff up to date on the latest and out of their habits, something like this is so effortless that we're bringing, the laggards, if I can say that. I hope none of my colleagues are listening, that they're up to speed, and it's working very, very well.
James, as we moved along this, what we pontificate as the digitalisation journey, and what I have referred to as removing the resistance, has there been traditional resistance, as you said there, maybe from the laggards or from some of the learners, from the students? How fast have they engaged?
The secret is, if you have resistance within either the teaching or the students, is to give it to the students, because this generation X and Z, as you refer to, they can see where this is going. It's a no-brainer, and they adopt it. And so suddenly the people who are not adopting it are seeing that I need to get up to speed. And we're seeing that it's a wave that carries everybody up. So it's very positive.
Anna, in your work within Building Smart, is there much resistance, or are we able then to move faster because there's a greater engagement on the wider European model?
Can you repeat, please, Paul?
We're talking there to James about some of the resistance in the digitalisation within an organisation such as KEA, but on the wider European model, with your role in Building Smart, leading the way, do you find less or more resistance on the wider European model?
Yes, we are working on that. The first thing, I think the most important thing of the Building Smart activity is they are really promoting worldwide, and both among the demand and on the offer side. Because we have in many European countries the obligation of using BIM, but very often the municipalities don't know how to deal with digital models. And so we are promoting some basic learning for really everybody, 360 degrees. And then only after that we develop within Building Smart also more specific learning outcome for BIM experts or BIM manager or BIM coordinator. I think that it's important to understand that there is a fundamental base that should be used by anyone, by the single worker and a single technician at the municipality, to really take all the advantages of digitalization.
Thank you, Anna. As we make the journey, folks, and delivering the skills that we see as industry requires and the learner requires, we don't need just to measure the skills themselves, but the impact of the skills. And Diana, question for yourself. Do you believe that digitalization has an important role in the realization of zero energy buildings, and in what phase or which phase?
Absolutely. Actually, we have confirmed that through our previous research in case studies we have developed, BIMcert, as well as other projects of ARISE partners. We have confirmed that digital skills, when implemented for building plan, design, construction, and operation, provide faster, more accurately energy savings that are measurable, expressible in measuring units such as gigawatt hours and euros of savings, and investments transferred to investments in clean energy sources. So all design alternatives are processed in a faster way and more accurately if digital skills, digital models of buildings are applied, digital twins, BIM architectural models and energy models. They're more visible for the investor, and later for the construction company and for the owner of the building. They provide, as we presented today, energy simulation in order to optimize consumption patterns and to reduce further energy consumption in the building, preserving health and comfort of the occupant. So the answer to the question is yes, we are convinced with that, we have confirmed that, and we would dedicate our work in the project to improve the digital competencies that are leveraging energy performance of buildings.
Thank you, Diana. Jan, we'll take the same question to yourself and ask you about that digitalization and the delivery of reduction of CO2 in buildings, and your background in the work of the app you talked about, how that is having an impact, not just with the learner, but also with industry in reducing the carbon footprint of construction.
Yeah, a difficult question, but I will try to answer it. Within what we see is that we are in the middle of the energy transition of sustaining the built environment. And we started with energy. But in fact, if we are going to transition the built environment into a green, just, healthy, and so on built environment, we need far more than energy. We need circularity, we need to address materials, we need to address quality of life, we need to address the environment around the buildings. And that means that not only digitization will be used within the building, it's really about digitization of the built environment, connecting the building to the environment in order to create additional values. And what we see is that if you use the appropriate methodologies to pinpoint the changes that are needed, and if you can deliver task-based learning content that is valuable for all the actors in the value chain, then you are together able to address the challenges in the built environment. So for example, in the Netherlands, we are working hard on electrification of the built environment. And that means that the connection of the building to the grid will become much more important. And there are digital skills in place there, but there are also very traditional skills that need to be done in a better way in order to make sure the building can connect properly. So I hope this example gives you a little bit of insight. Digitization, a key element in transition of the built environment to connect the different values and the different actors together. Because on a single task, there can be 10 occupations involved. So all those 10 occupations need to be properly skilled to deliver that task in the built environment.
Jan, thank you very much. Barry, a question for yourself is coming through here, and it's asking about digitalization and with students, given that you're leading there in Technology University Dublin, and how we now need to reduce the carbon footprint. How have the students engaged in this digitalization journey, and do they embrace it?
Yeah, I suppose from my perspective, we have a number of postgraduate courses here in TU Dublin. And the postgraduate courses from that and the undergraduate that we have, the add-on is that BSc Honours and BIM, is that they're very industry driven in terms of that. You're seeing a lot of organisations starting to put their people forward in regards to trying to upskill themselves in order so they can bring that back into the organisation. And a lot of people are also coming onto the courses because they see this as a way to retrain themselves to embrace further opportunities and maybe to kind of give them a second run or a second kind of lift within the sector because you might feel a little bit bored. So we're seeing a huge surge in interest in this particular space since very positively post-COVID. And we also have undergraduate modules in regards to BIM, and you're starting to see students be I suppose, exposed to these technologies and processes quite early, and it's starting to really change the way to think. It's starting to kind of get them invested even more in the courses. They're starting to see different ways and, different kind of collaboration methods. And when it comes to sustainability, some of it, we do have multidisciplinary projects. We have sustainability focused modules, and students are starting to understand that when they kind of build a model, initially, there are particular elements that they can consider and they can use and they can integrate with their, I suppose, software packages, as well as skill sets and understanding how they can make the model a little bit more sustainability friendly. But what they're doing is they're starting to consider, and what I've noticed, Paul, a more life cycle holistic approach to the way that they would do construction. And that's impacting them, what they're bringing into their organization and what they're going on to do further studies, because it's no longer their approach to their profession and this is what we have to do in order to tick the box, in order so we can kind of step away. It's not that anymore. It's more an appreciation to how this particular decision might impact down the line. And so I'm starting to kind of see that specifically in our courses. And that is the natural evolution we need for all students going forward, to be collaborative and more aware of life cycle costs.
If we take the same question and go to yourself, Andrew, because today we're looking at vocational educational training. In your work in engaging with industry and the blue collar worker who's come off the building site, is now in the office, who doesn't have the paperwork to recognize the skills to move forward, how are you finding this digitalization journey with that swathe of blue collar workers to become more vocationally mobile?
I think traditionally as an FE and HE college, that's kind of where we interface a lot of the time, is those people wanting to transition from a trade or a site role into lower and then up into middle management. I think one of the biggest advantages we've had with this blended approach is like 6-7 years ago we started our first BIM courses. Now those initially were looking at modelling, and if I look back then to see the breadth and distance that people were travelling, we're obviously Belfast city centre located, but we had people coming from up nearly as far as Derry and Newry and across the north, maybe travelling 60 miles to come to a course. And what we've seen with particularly with lockdown and moving a lot of those courses online. You know, the people have continued to come from those distances, but they're not having to travel. They're not, you know, leaving the site at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, beating their way through city centre traffic to get to a class for 5:30 for an evening class, and then leaving the college at 9:30 at night to travel home. So in terms of accessibility, it really has increased the accessibility and the reach. I think alongside that, one of the big drivers, but certainly for us as a college, was working with our IT departments, because what they did alongside that, obviously, and I'm talking here before Barry maybe corrects me, I'm talking purely about the modelling aspect of this, where you do have the hardware restriction at times. You know, we developed virtual servers that are running the Revit software that we would train on, so you can basically access that from any laptop as long as you have a keyboard, a mouse, and a screen. So that has really opened up our learning as well, not just the accessibility, but also having access to that hardware as well as the software as well. So yeah, I'm just coming to a point. I know you sort of asked Barry about the sustainability. Personally, I think sometimes we get caught up in the sustainability aspect of what we do as construction professionals in terms of the building, but as educators, I think we need to think about that sustainability in terms of how far people are traveling and the carbon miles, if you want to put it that way, in terms of where our learners are coming from. So I think the digital learning certainly has a significant contribution to make to that. And as a college who's just published its recent vision for the next 3 to 4 years, you know, sustainability is core to that. And that is one of the things that we're looking at, that we use blended learning to reduce the amount of travel necessarily for our learners.
Thank you very much, Andrew. James, there's a great question here for you. I know you're going to love this, given that you pontificated all about blockchain. It says, Is there any way on the system to document prior learning? So how do you recognize prior learning when somebody engages and wants to come onto the system? So is there a way of recognizing that prior learning?
There is a way, but it's in its infancy. And so it can be of two methods. One can be some interrogation to see who you are and what you are. The other can be that you self-tell what you know and what you do. And the other is by looking at what you have documented as getting you to where you are today, we can begin to be proactive and say, if you've got A, B, and C, maybe D, E, and F is relevant for you. So there are possibilities out there. What blockchain can do is it can, A, it can assess you when you come in, and B, is that while you're within the system, it can begin to see what you are choosing to engage with. And so we can begin to pick up patterns. We can begin to see that if you've taken 17 of these units or modules, that if you took another 3, it would complete you as somebody relevant to building a smart. Or if it was within a large engineering firm, they could identify 20 modules as relevant for what they want all their staff to be up to date with. So we can, using the gamification front end of the system, we can see that when you log on as someone from Arabs or whatever, that these 20 modules are relevant for you. So it's, the short answer is yes, we can. The long answer is we need to engage in several different places, and it's front end blockchain rather than the back end, which I presented here today, which is validation. But the possibilities are there, and blockchain can allow us to begin to engage and see who you are, either on a proactive front or on a responsive front, to see what is relevant for you. But yes, it can.
Thank you, James. Daniel, can I ask you just to move on one more slide there, please? Just as we come to the end, the conclusion is skills matter. We must foster a digital culture. Digitalization of skills and training is well underway, and now we look to Industry 4.0. Next slide, please, Daniel. Now, as we wind up and we come to the end, don't forget today's presentation is about vocational educational training. I give my thoughts in the previous slide what success looks like. So I'm going to go through, in summary, each of the panelists and ask the same question. To you, what does success look like for the VET sector with digitalization as the catalyst? Anna, I'll start with yourself, please. Your view of success with digitalization as the engine driving the VAT sector?
I believe that digitalization is the only future we have, because it's the millennium children are born with the laptop and mobile, and we know that there are a lot of things that can be done through digitalization, not only training as we have seen today, but also the management of building. So the future is that now we try to reach that target as faster. So ARISE project is just a way to reach faster, but we know that the final will be that, cannot be a different one.
Thank you, Anna. Diana, the same question to yourself. Coming from North Macedonia, where you're engaging with us in the project, what does success look like from that part of Europe with digitalization as the core?
Yes, well, success looks like the future in which we manage to use all the opportunities that provided by the modern era of Industry 4.0 of digitalization, first of all. So if we learn to use all the opportunities that are available, then we can see a measurable success in our professions and lives.
Thank you very much, Diana. Andrew, from a further education point of view, engaged with the vocational education sector, how do we now use digitalization to get that asset more mobile?
I think it's, as I said earlier, Puff, I know you're asking for success in getting the asset more mobile. I think for me, it's that widening participation across the sector. And I think if I think back to one of our conferences we had as part of the BIMcert project, when we had a contractor, relatively small contractor, coming along to listen to what we were talking about in terms of digitalization, and at the end of it saying, I'm not doing anything digital at all, but we used Dropbox and OneDrive for sharing files, and just realizing that that was the first step, or that's moving towards. So, you know, he was actually more digital than he realized. And as I've said earlier, this is creeping into all aspects of life. And one of the key things within construction across all levels is communication. And I'm not saying digital improves it, it makes it easier, because we still need to learn to communicate together. It's just the tools that we're using are more efficient. And, you know, I'm old enough and may not look it to remember whenever we used to communicate by letter into the drawing office, and you responded and you had time to respond with the letter and print the drawings. And then email came along, and I was listening to the radio just last night and they were talking about fax machines, things that young people today will not even remember. But if you think about how much communication tools, but we still need to learn how to communicate and speak and work together as teams. So that's the measure of success, using the tools to better communicate and widen participation.
Staying on the island of Ireland, moving from Belfast to Dublin, Barry from Technology University Dublin, what does success look like in 2022 and beyond for the sector?
Yeah, Paul, I think success can come in many different forms. I believe from construction sector, I believe that a more productivity and a reduction in waste. When I say waste, I don't mean construction materials, I mean people's time, I mean carbon. From a people side, the construction sector, I generally believe a more happier workforce that are, are enlightened to embrace these technologies that makes their work a little bit more easier and fun at the end of the day, if you want to call it that. And from my perspective here in TU Dublin, I think success would look like a diversified sector that we see starting to come towards us for upskilling. And I don't mean, and when I'm talking about diversified, I mean more women coming in from, coming into the construction industry, because it is male dominated, and also that age gap being kind of reduced, where you see people maybe at a later stage of career going, you know what, it's not too time to change, and I want to get up with these, and I want to embrace it. and also going down to the secondary school level, high school level, where we start to see construction become a little bit more enthusiastic, embraced, and moving away from the bricks and mortar, and seeing that no, there's a lot more going on here, and it's a lot more attractive than I first thought. And that goes even all the way across to the trades and the blue collar workers, who are absolutely the fulcrum of the industry. That's, you know, a couple of any one of them, Paul, pick.
Thank you, Barry. That's a multiple choice answer. Thank you. Jan, same question to yourself. Success, what does it look like today and moving forward?
Yeah, I will try to keep it as short and concise as possible. For me, success is when your day-to-day learning can get approved. So not improvement of prior learning, but if I'm learning today a new skill, that I can get the recognition directly after I'm successful. And I think digitization will help that.
That is concise, that is to the point, and I think that's nearly the best comment. If we can capture that as a summary for today and put that at the top of the slides. Last but not least, Dr. James Hardy in Copenhagen, originally from Carrickmacross in County Monaghan. James, what does success look like for you personally, but also for KEA moving forward with the VET sector?
Yeah, I want to endorse what my colleagues have said. I think communication and women and all of those things and getting recognition at the time is very, very important. Here in Copenhagen or in Denmark next year, we're going to have to implement life cycle analysis at our concept design level. So we're going to see a process where you're taking life cycle analysis on board at the start. Pat Mccauley from Building Smart has said for each dollar spent in design, it equates to $20 in assembly and to $60 in maintenance and life cycle. So what we're beginning to see here and what we're going to have to implement in our school is that we're going to have a model that can accompany the project from conception all the way through to decommissioning. And this means that we're going to have a situation where we're going to be closer and closer to the digital twin. A digital twin is the virtual model being a replica of the reality, the real building. And it's not an easy path, but it's an admirable journey to begin. And it's going to empower us, I think, all the way along. And it will be a huge success if we can have a digital twin where we can do analysis, we can do performance, we can do what ifs, we can see, is the building performing optimally? And the more that we begin to have sensors and monitors in buildings, we can begin to get feedback that we are doing this correctly or not. So this idea of rewarding people who do what's the best building for us, I think is going to become a key feature in the future.
James, panel, many thanks for all your comments. There's one last comment here in the questions is many thanks, lots of synergies with other projects, especially Construction Blueprint. We were delighted to engage. We are already engaged with Construction Blueprint through an organization that we work with. It's BIM EPA, BIM Energy Performance Alliance. All of the modules that we have been developed under the different BIM projects the last 10 years are now in that Construction Blueprint with Liz in, it was Limerick IT, Technology University of Shannon, Southwest, I think it's called. But it shows that there's coordination all across Europe in the work that we're doing. That coordination is gradually building success. That coordination is evident today. It's my pleasure to sit and to chair a panel with such experts, as I said, from Italy, Copenhagen, Denmark, North Macedonia, Ireland, Portugal, Brussels, all coming together to unlock the potential within the VET sector, to provide the oil to keep that engine moving and to accelerate that journey. Our contact details are there. As Anna said during her presentation, we welcome and we encourage interaction with other projects, individuals to engage. So it makes sure that what we design and what others design is fit for purpose. It's probably a great analogy to use right at the end of a digitalization conference, to use an old analog saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So if the tools that we design are not fit for purpose, they will not be used. So that's the challenge we have, to engage, to stimulate, and to maintain that engagement with the sector, so that it's not a stop-start, it's a dynamic system and it moves forward. And that's our challenge that we're rising to within ARISE, BIMcert and the other projects, within Construction Blueprint and other partners. Today has been an excellent session. I'd like to thank the panel for their time, thank the panel for their input. They've kept on time. Everybody stayed below the 10 minutes, so we get extra time in the Q&A. We've let the Q&A run over a bit because there's been that engagement from outside. What you see here on the screen is a lovely swan image above the water. Everything's perfect, nice and serene and smooth. What you don't see beneath the water, you have Daniel Avaron and Maria Perez in build-up skills, making sure everything's working, making sure the IT is working for us. You have Larissa and the TCE making sure we join all the dots, that everybody was there on time and the dress rehearsals all went well. What I'm getting across is it's no solo effort. If we are to succeed in this and to engage the VET sector to be of their best, it takes cohesion. Cohesion between industry, partners such as ourselves, and with the DG in Europe, to make sure we come up with the recommendations and the systems that will allow that. So it's my pleasure to thank the audience for attending today on behalf of the panel, to thank the panel for their input and continued expertise, build up skills for providing the infrastructure. And folks, we hope to see you again in the not too distant future. Thank you all very much indeed. Can the panel please stay on? And Daniel, if you can stop recording and a quick wind up and wrap up just for 5 minutes if we can, please.